Hey, my name is Jamie Aaron, and in today's lesson, we're going to talk about playing the changes over a blues progression. This is going to help the sound of the chords in the 12-bar blues progression, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, come out in your playing. So if somebody was to listen to you play over a 12-bar blues, they could tell where you were in the form and what chords you were playing over just by what you play. You know, there's a huge misconception in the blues that when we play blues, all we have to do is just play out of the minor pentatonic scale. And all those notes will work and it's fine. But we really need to pay attention when we play to where we are in the form, and it's really helpful and musical to have your blues guitar solos reflect the sound of the chord changes. And this is something we're going to talk about. You know, back in college, I was a jazz major, and the jazz bass teacher said something to me once. He said, you know what the difference is between a jazz guitar player and a blues guitar player? When a jazz guitar player plays over a blues progression, they play the changes, whereas a blues guitar player just plays out of the pentatonic scale and doesn't really pay attention to the changes. And at the time, I kind of thought, oh, I guess that makes sense. But as I studied deeper in the blues, I realized this is not true at all. This is a total misconception. And even blues players with a limited vocabulary of just the minor pentatonic scale can make the sound of the blues come out in the guitar solo, in your playing. I'm going to show you 4 simple concepts to get the sound of the blues in your playing. And by the way, you don't have to hit the changes when you play the blues, right? There are times that I'm just playing just repeated minor pentatonic licks, and that's fine and that's great, but it's a good thing to be able to hit the changes some of the time because you want the listener to be able to feel the chords changing within your solo. Not just that the chords are meaningless and you're just playing a bunch of A minor pentatonic, guitar cliches over, just spitting out a bunch of repeated A minor licks, but really that you're getting inside the changes and you're bringing that gravitational pull of the chord changing to the 4 chord, changing to the 5 chord with you, because you want your lines to reflect the sound of the chord changes, because those chord changes mean something. We're going to talk about chord tones, and then I'm going to show you a couple easy ways to move the pentatonic scales that you already know in a way to make them sound like you're getting the changes of the blues happening in your playing. So our first approach to getting the sound of the blues changes to happen in your blues playing will simply be playing the roots of every chord when they happen. So we're going to be playing out of an A blues. And remember, in the key of A, our 1 chord is A, our 4 chord is D, and our 5 chord is E. Of course, they'll all be dominant 7th chords, A7, D7, and E7. So what we're going to do is we're going to just play out of our minor pentatonic box. But we're really going to focus on hitting the root of each chord when we land on it. And to get acquainted with that, let's find all the A's in this box. You might even jump up to the A here. Let's find all the D's, all of our 4 chords. And all of the E's, our 5 chord. Just jump up here if you want. You can play whatever you want in between, but we're just going to focus on hitting the roots when we land on a new chord. So even without the track, right? If I just start playing, you can hear that I'm playing bluesy ideas, but it's a lot harder for you to tell where I am in the form. So I'm now going to play unaccompanied. I'm just going to hit the roots when we land on each beat 1, and you'll be able to hear the sound of the blues progression reflected in that. So you could hear, when I landed on the 4 chord, I jumped up to a D, the root of the 4 chord. Then back to the 1. And when I went to the 5 chord, I did a little idea like this. right? I'm still staying in my pentatonic box, but I'm emphasizing the 5 chord, the root of the 5 chord, E. And then I slid into the root of the D chord. You can hear that. Da, 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 na, 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 na. And then back to the 1. And then I hit the root of the 5 chord when I landed on the 5 chord. So you could tell, even without the sound of the backing track, I was playing over a blues. And that's the idea. A really common little B.B. King idea when he's playing, and he would go to the 4 chord, he would sometimes do this little bend on the 5th fret, this E, and then land on the D. That's sort of emphasizing the root of the 4 chord. So now that we've done the root, let's take a look at the 3rd of each chord. If you need to review chord tones, especially in the blues, I encourage you to check out my Voice Leading the Blues video, which I'll link below, where we talk about the importance of the 3rds and the 7ths in defining the sound of each chord. So if we play a blues, and now we're going to emphasize the 3rd of each chord when we land on each chord, that means we're going to play a C sharp every time we're on the 1 chord, A7, and our C sharps are here, here, and here. Then when we get to the 4 chord, D7, we're going to play an F sharp. And then when we get to the 5 chord, E7, we're going to play a G sharp, because that's the 3rd of E7. So every time we land on a new chord, we're going to hit the 3rd of that chord. One thing to me that really separates amateur blues guitar players from more experienced blues guitar players, particularly ones that have done listening, is the ability to use the major 3rd over the 1 chord. When we play an A minor pentatonic scale, A is our root of our key, but this C, that's not in that A7 chord. That C is the minor 3rd, the flatted 3rd. Now it sounds good over an A7 in the sound of the blues. We've sort of accepted that sound. But the chord has a C sharp in it, not a C natural. So something that really separates amateur blues guitar players and more experienced blues guitar players, particularly ones that have done a lot of listening, is the ability to use the major 3rd, or that C sharp, over the 1 chord with ideas like this. Because that 3rd, it's in the chord. And then we go to the 4 chord, we'll land on the 3rd of D7. Back to the 3rd of the 1 chord, C sharp. The 3rd of the 5 chord, G sharp, which is the 3rd of E7. 3rd of D7. So now we're starting to think about notes that are in each of these chords, as opposed to thinking of one scale that will work over the entire thing. So here it is with the track. So now let's try the same thing with the flatted 7th of each chord, right? You can find the flatted 7th, just take your major scale, A major. That's the natural 7, a half step lower, that's the flatted 7, a note that makes it a dominant 7 chord. So our flat 7 of A7 is going to be G. Our flat 7 of D7 is going to be C natural. And our flat 7 of E7 So here's the sound of a blues just hitting those flat sevens of each chord. So you can hear I did a lot of ideas starting on that flat 7, the G of the A7 chord. D7, I'd go up to a C. Back to my G for the A7. D for my E7. C for my D7. So another important note, but really where you get some great smooth voice leading, the sound of going from one chord to the next, is when you connect the third of the one chord to the seventh of the 4 chord, because they're just a half step away. And this is something I cover in my Voice Leading the Blues class that I've linked below. Because the third of our A7 is C sharp, and the flat 7 of our D7 is C natural. So those notes are just a half step away. So if I'm playing over the 1 chord, and then I just move down a half step to that C natural when the D7 chord comes, that sound of the chord change is really emphasized in my playing. And you can take one idea change one note, right? Change that C sharp to a C natural. And you can hear the sound of the chord change. So when we're talking about over the 1 chord, this little idea is C sharp, E, F sharp, C sharp, E. I'm thinking of the C sharp on the 6th fret of the G string, and then the E on the 5th fret of the B string, to the F sharp on the 7th fret of the B string, and back. Now I'm just going to go down by one note and change that C sharp to a C natural. So you can hear just by changing one note, I get the sound of the chord change. Another cool way is doing the reverse. The flat 7 of our 1 chord, G, is just a half step away from the 3rd of our 4 chord. So you can hear when I went to that 4 chord, I took that G, made it an F sharp. There's the 3rd of my 1 chord. Now the 7th of my 4 chord, switching one note. Back to the 3rd, C sharp. So a great way that you can get this sound easily into your playing, particularly the sound of the 3rd of the 1 chord going to the flat 7 of the 4 chord, is to just use 2 different pentatonic scales. Over the 1 chord, we're going to play A major pentatonic. Right? A major pentatonic has kind of a happier of a happier sound. Some associate it with country. It's something that B.B. King used a lot of the time. And the reason it sounds a bit happier, you have your root, the second of the scale over an A7, the major third, there's that C sharp we were talking about, the fifth, and the sixth. Or we could call that the 13th when we're talking about an A7 chord. So over our 1 chord, we're going to use A major pentatonic. When we switch to the 4 chord and the 5 chord, we're going to go to A minor pentatonic. And the reason that that really sounds good is because the A major pentatonic has the C sharp. And the A minor pentatonic has the sound of the C natural, which is the flat 7 of the D chord. If we look at the notes of the A minor pentatonic and how they relate to a D7 chord, A is the 5th, C is the flatted 7th, D is the root, E is the 9th or 2nd, G is the 11th or 4th. So the sound of the chord changing actually happens. So you get this great juxtaposition. Major, minor, back to major, to minor, so you get that nice sound of the chord changing. You could go from this box, just move it up 3 frets, and play the same kind of idea. Copy and paste that same idea. Right, I just took this little idea and I moved it up 3 frets. But you can also find the A major pentatonic in this little zone. And then the A minor pentatonic, and you don't have to switch positions. Here's an example with the track using the major pentatonic over the 1 chord and the minor pentatonic over the 4 chord and the 5 chord. Major pentatonic. Minor pentatonic. To minor. Again, major pentatonic. Minor. Back to major and minor. Major. Major over the 1. Minor over the 4. Major. Now some E7 idea. Major over the 1. Minor over the 4. Major over the 1. Minor. So when we're talking about pentatonics, the reason that A minor pentatonic works over this 1 chord, even though the 1 chord has that major third, the sound of the root and the sound of the 1 is so strong that we can have that C sharp, and it just gives this kind of bluesy quality but we don't really need to hear it resolve because the sound of that 1 is so strong. When we go to the 5 chord, E, we can play E minor pentatonic. Even though there's that minor third, that G, which is not in our chord, if we play that G, it makes the 5 chord sound like an E7 sharp 9, which is an altered chord. That's a chord you can use to bring out tension over the 5 chord, which wants to resolve to 1. I'll link my video about altered chords below if you want to check out what altered chords are. So we can use that E minor pentatonic over the 5 chord, and it'll sound good. What you can't do is use D minor pentatonic over the 4 chord. And the reason it doesn't work is because the D7 has that F sharp, that major third. D minor pentatonic has an F, and the sound of the F and that F sharp, it really clashes. You can use that minor third on the 1 chord because the 1 chord is so strong that it's stable. You can use it over the 5 chord because the 5 chord you can have that tension. But the 4 chord, we need to hear that F sharp. So you have to play something like D Mixolydian, or just some kind of D7 lick that has the F sharp in it. So a great lick over the 5 chord, something like that. You got your E, G, A, B. That's B string, 5th fret, 8th fret. Then the E string, 5th fret, 7th fret. Little 5 to 6 trill. And then for the 4 chord, you can do something like a little phrase like that. That's emphasizing that major third, the F sharp. F sharp, that's the 7th fret of the B string, to the 5th fret of the high E and back. Then 8th fret of the high E string, 5th fret, 7th fret, back to the 5th fret. And then something like that. That gets you back to 1. We can also think about using the A Mixolydian mode over the 1 chord, the D Mixolydian mode over the 4 chord, and the E Mixolydian mode over the 5 chord. Because the Mixolydian mode contains all the chord tones and extensions of a dominant 7 chord. So one thing you can really do is just emphasize playing those particular chords. So if I'm playing over the 1 chord, for the 4 chord, I might play a D7 idea. Same kind of idea, just up at the 10th fret. Now when I'm playing over the 5 chord, I could also play this kind of E7 idea. Here's a little Stevie Ray, T-Bone Walker inspired thing where over the 5 chord you'll play this. So that's emphasizing an E7. I'll play it slow. We're going to slide into the G sharp at the 13th fret of the G string. Then B, 12th fret of the 2nd string. And then E, 12th fret of the 1st string. So it's kind of like playing a triad. Then here's the flat 7. That's a D, 15th fret of the B string. Then the 9th, F sharp, 14th fret of the high E string. We're going to do this little trill, 12 to 13 on the high E string, then 15 to 12 on the B string. Then on the G string, 14, little hammer on from 12 to 13, that's giving us our major third, and then the root. So over our 5 chord, we got this. I'll do it really slow. Then over the 4 chord, we're going to do a similar idea. Just 2 frets lower. But instead of finishing the lick, we're going to set it up to get us back to 1. Sliding into the 7th fret on the G string, 5th fret on the G string, our root, 7th fret on the D string, and then hop up to this root here, 5th fret of the high E. Here it is slow. And you can hear the sound of the changes. A little variation. And when you get to the D chord, instead of playing the lick verbatim from the E7, you could go F sharp, A, F sharp, or that's 11 on the G string, 10 on the B string, back and forth. And then walk down on the high E string, 12, 11, 10. Then on the B string, 13 to 10. You'll hit this G on the 12th fret of the G string, and then slide into that same lick. The last idea we're going to look at is really simple. I call this the Albert King hack. I did a video on this Albert King trick a couple years ago where there are a few more lick examples. I'll go ahead and link that below. Basically, whenever he would hit the 5 chord, in this case E7, he would take the home pentatonic key and move it up 2 frets or up a whole step. So if we're playing a blues in A, right, we're playing A minor pentatonic. When Albert King would hit the 5 chord, he would play B minor pentatonic, just moving that A minor pentatonic up 2 frets. And then when you go back to the 4 chord or the 1 chord, he would just move that back down. So you'd hear ideas like this. Here's that idea slow. So I'm starting on the 12th fret. This is a B, 12th fret of the B string, playing it twice. Then 10th fret of the high E string, and then 12th fret, and then a whole step bend, back to the 10th fret of the high E string. There's the 12th fret. There's the 10th fret, 12th fret, and back to the 12th fret of the B string. Then you'll just take that idea and move it down 2 frets. Finish it. Another one. So over your 5 chord, taking my first finger and going to the 7th fret, both the B string and the E string, alternating back and forth. Then this D, 10th fret of the high E string, and then back to the 7th fret. That's over the 5 chord. And then when I get to the 4 chord, I'm gonna move that same idea back down. So why does that work? Well, here's why it works. If we look and analyze the notes of B minor pentatonic, how they relate to an E7 chord, B is the 5th of E, D is the flat 7, E is the root, F sharp is the 2nd or 9th, A is the 11th or 4th. So we get a combination of these chord tones and extensions of E7. So those notes work. And a really simple version of this lick that you've heard Stevie Ray play as well right? When you get to the 5 chord, you just hit G string 7th fret, and then E string 7th fret. And if we look at that, that's just coming out of an E9 chord. The flat 7 and the 5th. Then this little slide on the G string, 7th fret to 5th fret, and then 5th fret on the E. Once again, that's highlighting that D9 chord. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. If you learned something, please like, comment, and subscribe. This is a really important skill that really separates the pros from the amateurs, and it shows that you've listened to the greats. And a lot of the way that I've picked up this vocabulary has not just been practicing and learning and transcribing, but just listening. If you listen to players like Otis Rush, B.B. King, Albert King, Robin Ford, Larry Carlton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, you'll start to get the sound of those changes into your playing, and they'll come out in your vocabulary. Listening is really important. I also have a little mini handout with some of the theory behind these ideas written out on my Patreon page. If you want to join me on Patreon for $5 a month, you get weekly exclusive lessons, PDF transcriptions of my YouTube lessons, and mini lessons on Instagram, as well as live Q&As and more. Thank you for watching this lesson. I'll see you in the next video.